This is Aiken Cemetery, and it sits up on top of a little mound called Crawley's Ridge. Crawley's Ridge extends from Wynne all the way up through past Jonesboro, up into Paragould, where I just was. And it's basically this little mound formed, I think, from an earthquake that, shoved the earth up. Our house in Wynne sits on top of Crawley's Ridge. This cemetery is on Crawley's Ridge. This is where my grandmother and grandfather are buried, Granny and Papaw, as I knew them. My Papaw died in 1979. My dad passed away in 1981, so they were very close together. My granny lived until 2009, and she stayed in the same house that my Papaw built. Next to them is a little grave for Joe Childers. Now, I have had this wrong throughout most of my life, thinking that Joe was born before my dad. Joe, I think, was actually the third child because he was born in 1937. September 5th, 1937. He died July 1st, 1939. So wasn't quite 2 years old. And I don't really know the story of that. I was actually an adult before I even knew about Joe. Nobody ever talked about Joe, and I don't really know why. But then, after it sort of came out, it was a little easier to talk about. And then next to them is my dad's sister, Barbara, Bobby, as we called her. She died just a couple of months after my dad in 1981. My dad died in March. She died in May. Suffered with cancer for years. Just a wonderful lady. And so they're all buried here together. Now I've got some other family here in the cemetery too that I'm going to walk around and try to find. I always remember where this is. It's in the bottom left corner as you drive in, so it's easy to come to. But I do want to visit a few more places here before I move on and drive on into Wynne. I guess being at Giles's funeral or his remembrance service kind of prompted me to want to visit a few more people from the family. And on the back of Granny and Papaw's headstone is a list of their children in the order they were born. So it was Dewey, my dad, and then Barbara, and then Joe, and then Giles, then Betty, and my Uncle Don. Betty is the only one that is still alive. And she was at the remembrance service. It was very nice to see her. This is Cross Lawn Cemetery, and it sits just, a half a mile or a mile outside of Wynne, Arkansas, where I lived when I graduated high school. This is where my dad is buried. As I said, he died in 1981. He died before his 48th birthday, so he was just 47 at the time. This is my brother's grave next to them, Steve Anthony Childers. He died 11 years ago in 2013. And man, it just doesn't seem like it's been that long. And then, of course, there's a place here next to my dad for my mom. And we've got all those arrangements all worked out as to how that's going to take place. When my dad was buried here, shortly after that, my mom got permission. This cemetery was built on the idea that no headstones would be above ground, but she got permission to plant this tree. And we have several trees like this in our yard now, and I think it's gotten to be much bigger than she anticipated when she planted it. But I think it's a nice tribute. I have a a cousin that comes to put flowers on both graves, several times throughout the year. It's a vast difference between the Aiken Cemetery up on the hill on Crawley's Ridge with all of these old headstones, and then Cross Lawn down here in the Rice Belt, totally flat land. And of course, at 65, I've got to start thinking about these things. I haven't really thought about them before. I shouldn't say that. I haven't thought about them as being important before. So, the questions arise, and I guess they're questions that I need to talk with my daughters about. So, Brittany and Elise and Sarah, if you're watching this video, be prepared. We're going to have this conversation soon. Do I want to be buried in a place like Aikens? I mean, not necessarily out in the countryside, separated from humanity, but in a place with headstones and, the typical old-fashioned type cemetery look? Or do I want to be buried in a place like Cross Lawn, which is very new in its appearance? Do I want to be buried in Chattanooga, where I live? Do I want to get a plot here and come? I can't get one next to my mom and dad and brother, but I get one close, and I could at least be in proximity. But then nobody would ever come visit me, and does that matter? These are all questions running through my head as I am taking this little tour through Wynne today. They don't have to be answered today, but they're going to have to be answered soon. Some type of plan's got to be in place. I don't know. Maybe for my 66th birthday, we can have that conversation. Well, I am home, as you can tell from the surroundings. And the first thing that I decided to do as I was finishing up the edit of this video was to pop open a bottle of Juniper Tree Meadery Current Distress. Out of all of the ones that I sampled, this one was my favorite. It's like a glass of wine, although I don't have a wine glass. So we're going to enjoy it sparingly since I only have the one bottle. Just very quickly, I sort of set out to do a video of various places that were important in my life in Wynne. And when I got to the Aiken Cemetery, I realized that there was a lot more to dive into in this thought. Now, I understand this video might have turned out a little more morbid than I intended, but I certainly didn't mean for it to be that way. I've just been processing a lot of stuff over the last couple of days, and with Giles passing and seeing all the family members and reminiscing about the ones that have been gone for some time now, it does give you a little bit of pause to think about what's going to happen. And so these are the questions. How will I be buried? Will I be buried? Will I be cremated? Probably not. But I do joke with my girls that I'm going to be cremated and we're going to get 3 urns and they can each take part of me home with them. But I don't think they find it funny. And the real question is, because I have not bought a plot, I don't have a casket picked out. We went through this with my dad. His death was so sudden. It was an industrial accident. And, my mom was just bombarded with decisions. What casket, open or closed, who's going to do the officiating, what music are we going to play, where's it going to be, where's he going to be buried? I mean, all of these things that she was just not really prepared to do. And when you're in sudden grief, you shouldn't have to be prepared to do that. And so she has made, very specific plans for when she's no longer with us. of how to get her back to Arkansas and how to get her next to my dad, and where the service is going to be. There's other things to work out, but the major issues, the casket's already chosen, everything's paid for, all of those big issues are done, which makes life so much simpler. And the last thing that I want to do is add a lot of stress to my daughters unnecessarily. So I need to make a decision. Where, how, when. Well, maybe not when. We'll worry about when later. What is it going to look like? And we need to sit down and have that conversation. So Brittany and Elise and Sarah, again, if you're watching this video, maybe a Zoom call. I need to make some plans. I don't intend for you to have to use those plans for another 30 or 35 years, but they need to be there. So anyway, tomorrow we'll get back on track. We'll get out of all this morbid stuff about life after death and, all that kind of stuff. And we'll get back into some just regular old videos. We'll see you tomorrow. Oh, man, that's good.